Hello, and welcome to the review. I'm Delaney Miles, and this is my co-host Evan. Now, 3 movies we're going to review today for you. Salò, or the 120 Days of Sodom, Antichrist, and Deadfall. To start it off, we got 120 Days of Sodom. In Italy during World War II, 4 fascist libertines take 18 of the most attractive people in the country in order to do, well, some things are better left unsaid. This movie has some of the most disturbing scenes of all time, according to many. And I would have to agree. Probably the 3rd most disturbing movie I've ever seen in my life. However, they're never used for shock value, and so I think that this movie actually has a lot of artistic merit.
I thought it was the most disgusting movie I've ever seen. Like, it was absolutely perverted, and I actually almost left halfway through. I don't even know how you see the art in this film.
Well, I don't understand how you couldn't see it. It was there in every shot. Every one of those shots was so beautiful. Well, aside from the ones of the shit, of course.
Yeah, well, Delaney, I'll tell you what I thought. The first shot, the cinematography of Italy, I really liked. And all of a sudden we get into these sadistic and perverted acts, which is totally unnecessary.
What my good friend Evan here doesn't understand is that this is a work of art. It's actually made by an intelligent and respected director in his time. Before this, he was practically the Italian Steven Spielberg. Like, you gotta understand here, like, he had the balls to make a movie this disturbing and crazy after being known as a guy who makes family movies. I wish the real Steven Spielberg would do that. Mix it up a little bit.
It was absolutely disgusting that they were forced to do this. I felt so bad for some of those women that were betrayed. They must have gone home and been absolutely disturbed. Like, how could the director tell them to do these things?
Well, it was obviously their choice.
Yeah, obviously a choice, but again, it's called acting. They probably acted like they were okay with it, but then they went home and had to drink themselves to sleep.
You know, they probably could have walked out any time.
Well, I'm just glad that this director isn't alive anymore, because if he is, he would be hearing from me.
Well, I'm not going to say I wasn't disturbed, but I think you must have been more disturbed than I was, because I gotta admit, it did cross a lot of lines, but I still think it wasn't actually for pure shock, and that there were actually reasons behind why he did it. For one thing, it's based off of a book where all this stuff happens in it, so he's just being faithful to the source.
I mean, I've actually heard of the book, and apparently there were situations in the book that were not put in the movie that were far worse. So for one, I was really glad that they didn't show that. And 2, it's really good that it was written in the 1700s and the author is dead, because I would have not wanted to meet him. If he wrote a novel like this, he must have been absolutely mentally unstable. And the fact that it was written in the 1700s meant that if this book got out to the Christians, he would have been burned at the stake. It's pretty clear that his screws were a bit loose. And not only that, but the fact that this Italian director would actually want to make a movie after him. And then he takes these actors and actresses and then gives them the script, and then they actually do it. Like, I can't believe that some of them actually agreed to it.
Maybe a few of them got a bit more than they bargained for, but they all must have signed some kind of contract.
Yeah, but you know what I actually later heard, and if you rent the DVD, you can see it on the special features, that the actors and actresses had to actually make a public apology for some of the scenes that were portrayed in this movie. And it's a good thing that they did, because I could not imagine how many people they disturbed and how many people walked out of this film mentally unstable, suicidal, an alcoholic, a drug addict, a criminal. Like, I could not imagine like how many people. Better yet, when they buried the director, they should have buried the movie with him and said, that's it, we're not ever showing this movie ever. So to end on that note, I can't believe this is only the 3rd most disturbing movie, because this is the most disturbing movie that I have ever seen, and I'm giving it a 2 thumbs down, and I'm tired of talking about it.
Well, you can think that if you want, but as for me, I think I'd give this a recommendation to anybody who thinks they're able to stomach it. If you want to see some good filmmaking and don't mind a few disturbing parts, I'd say check it out. Yeah, and I'd give it, well, at least a 1 thumb up.
Our next movie is a crime drama that was made in 1993 by Chris Coppola, who is the nephew of Francis Ford Coppola. The movie is called Deadfall, and let me tell you, I can't believe Chris Coppola and Francis Ford Coppola are actually related. because this movie was the worst piece of crap I have ever seen.
I think that this is one of the worst movies of all time. And it completely 100% deserves the 0% it got on Rotten Tomatoes. Although, the one good point about this movie is it has another Coppola family relative. And that is Nicolas Cage.
Alright.
Now, the only watchable part of the movie is his character. I don't even remember his name. It says how memorable this movie is.
Yes, it does. We would tell you the plot, except we don't even remember the plot because the plot was so bad that we couldn't even follow it. So I apologize that we couldn't give you any of the plot, but that's just how bad it was. Anyways, continue.
The only parts that were worth watching is Nicolas Cage in one of his most hilarious performances of his entire career.
Nicolas Cage, he's a really interesting actor because I've seen him in some really good movies, and he is an Academy Award winner. And it's interesting because Chris Coppola is his brother, so in a way, I can actually see how he agreed to do this. But,
for sure.
But his character was absolutely hilariously bad. Like, the only reason why I watched this was to see Nicolas Cage's character. It was just absolutely hilarious, and I'm not saying you should rent the movie to watch it. You should look it up on YouTube.
Yes, the highlights are all on YouTube, and I must say, they're pretty funny.
Yeah, and personally for me, what happened was that when I watched it, I watched Nicolas Cage character, laughed, and then when he was off the screen, I want to fast forward, and that's what we pretty much did. We fast forwarded to all the parts that he was in, had some good laughs. Unfortunately, and this movie is so terrible that I'm just going to give away the plot, he dies. So after his character dies, I got really uninterested to even continue. I have to say that we did, and I didn't even know what was going on with the plot.
And on top of that, there was still another half hour. It wasn't just 10 minutes, there was another half hour of movie. I don't even remember what happened.
The worst acting I've ever seen, the worst foreshadowing I've ever seen, incredibly predictable. I actually had to think about what else there was, because I actually want to forget this movie. The ending was not only predictable, but it was one of the dumbest endings I've ever seen. And now the main character, Michael Biehn, I believe his name is, from the first Terminator, now he was narrating this, and his narration was absolutely horrific.
Oh, you couldn't even tell his narration apart from the dialogue.
There's no emotion from the characters at all. They're supposed to be love scenes and fighting scenes and all these different scenes, but there was no emotion or passion at all. It actually looked like they were reading the script.
They seemed disinterested in their roles,
Yeah.
even. Like, the only person who looked like they had any fun on this movie was Nicolas Cage.
Yes, we actually find out that the reason why Nicolas Cage had so much fun was because Christopher Coppola and Nicolas Cage are brothers. Nicolas Cage agreed to do this movie only if he could do whatever he wanted. So Chris, being the good brother, let him experiment with his character, and it was the only good thing about this movie, really.
It's the only reason this movie shouldn't have every copy of it completely destroyed.
After Francis saw this movie, if he ever did, he honestly must have actually not believed that his own blood can make a piece of crap like this. So what I'm just going to say here is that I don't recommend this to anybody. However, I do recommend that you look up the parts with Nicolas Cage on YouTube, have a good laugh, but never ever, when you see this movie in the video store, don't even come close to it.
Yeah. The parts with Nicolas Cage are the only parts worth seeing at all. The
Yeah.
rest of it is complete trash.
Alright, so for me, I give this 2 thumbs way down. Biggest thumbs down I've ever given a movie.
Mm-hmm. Same here, and I also give it 2 middle fingers up.
What am I, a fucking retard, man? Am I a fucking retard, huh? I know what this is. Lou trying to snub me out because of his crazy little nephew being around. Well, vive la fucking France, man!
Our last film, but definitely not our least, that we'll be reviewing is Lars von Trier's Antichrist. And let me tell you, this is unlike any movie I've ever seen. I mean that in a good way. One of the most beautiful cinematographies I've ever seen.
And despite there being something you don't see in every movie in the first scene, it was done in a very beautiful way.
Yes, there were some scenes in this movie that were very different, and we're not even going to say the plot, because the plot is so pure and so different that we don't even want to give it away. The main actor in this movie, he's the one and only William Dafoe. This was one of the many things that attracted me to watching this.
Yeah. And he doesn't disappoint again this time. Like, even though this is a bit different than the roles that I've seen in, such as Platoon, he still does it brilliantly, and it's totally believable. And the other actress is Charlotte Gainsbourg. Actually, She almost shows up even more than Willem Dafoe, as her character is a bit more demanding, as you'll see if you watch it.
This movie is huge in symbolism. There's scenes in this movie that you would never imagine would be in a movie like this. And I just have to say that some of it is dark and some of it is disturbing. Like, what happened to me was that there was so much symbolism and biblical allusion in this movie that after I finished watching it, I had to go on the computer and actually look it up. Because being one who doesn't know the Bible very well, I had to go on and research what these allusions meant.
Yeah, he must be one of the most original directors of today, as I haven't seen anything like this ever. This is the only movie I've seen by him, but it won't be the last.
Yes, same with me. This is the first movie I've seen with him, and I can't wait to see his other projects because this was very different, very artistic. It was dark, and I have to warn you that you do have to have a little bit of a stomach.
The disturbing parts in this, while there's a lot less than, our previous mentioned movie, The 120 Days of Sodom, I'd say it goes a bit further.
In a way, it does actually go further, but it actually made sense why it was put in this movie. Because this movie is not a movie that's supposed to be sugar-coated at all. It's a movie that's supposed to portray this dark setting that just drags the audience more and more into it. And the more you watch it, the more things become revealed, and the more it makes sense. And the more it actually makes you think. That was one of the best things I liked about this movie, is that it made me think. That's why I really liked it.
Right, and another thing I should point out about this movie is that it came out in 2009, but I have to say it actually had some of the more impressive special effects of the year. Not too much CGI, but the effects in it were all very realistic, even for the disturbing parts. If I didn't know it was fake, I may have actually thought he actually did the things in this movie, which wouldn't have been good. It's almost terrifying how realistic it was, seeing as what they were doing was pretty messed up at times.
And that was something that I've only seen it in a few movies where it's so passionate and so good that we as the audience actually forget that there was a script and that it was acted, and then they had to go over a scene over and over again until they got it right. Like, it actually seemed like it was real. And thank goodness it wasn't, but just the job from both William Dafoe and I already forgot her name, but the actress was just one of the best I've ever seen.
Yeah. And another thing about this movie is that Willem Dafoe and Charlotte Gainsbourg are the only two actors in the entire movie.
Yes, actually. I forgot to mention that was one of the many things that made this different. It was written like a book with 4 parts and an epilogue at the end, so I actually like you were watching literature. And throughout the whole movie, we don't know their names, and they're the only 2 characters in the movie. And what I liked about this is that it helped you focus on their character. It makes the audience dig deeper into the characters, and that was one of the things that I really liked about it.
In this movie, the plot almost wasn't even that important, to tell you the truth. It wasn't the most complicated plot I've ever seen. In fact, it was pretty simple. But it was, like you said before, it was just so pure and so perfect. It just worked out. It was almost like you forgot you were watching a movie.
Yes, it was actually like that. Watching this film was like listening to music or reading a poem or even being in a dream. Like, it was absolutely phenomenal. And hardly do you ever see a film that is like this.
Oh, I don't think I've ever seen a film like this. I have barely anything to compare it to. So yeah, I'd say this is like one of the most original films I've ever seen. I'd say it's even one of the best movies that came out in the last 10 years.
So personally for me, what I recommend is to go on your computer, look it up. If you're a viewer that could stomach it, you'll see that the scenes were put in here for a very important reason. And I think that it was actually better that these scenes were put in here because they weren't put to shock the viewers, but they were put in to express the plot and the emotional relationship between the 2 characters. And so it was actually really important. So if you can handle it, rent it, and at the end of the movie you'll be absolutely amazed.
I give these 2 thumbs way up.
Same with me.
If you get the chance, watch this movie. And let me just say, it's only if you think you could handle a movie like this. Don't watch it if you're not partial to this kind of movie, because you will not like it and you may be scarred.
Chaos reigns.